Hello, good afternoon everybody, and a very warm welcome to everyone here to what is the final lecture of the 2018-19 Best of Bristol lecture series. The Best of Bristol lectures are a series that celebrate the engaging and inspiring teachers done by academics and lecturers across the university. And it sort of helps to foster a community of scholarship between students and staff and the public, and encourages them to come and engage in a topic that either they're very familiar with or indeed that they may not be familiar with at all. Nominations and shortlisting are all done by students, so this is truly a student-led series that's run in collaboration with the university and the Students' Union. David Bernhard is a teaching associate at the University of Bristol, where in 2014, he gained his PhD in cryptography. The thesis focused on zero-knowledge proofs in theory and practice, and whilst that might not mean too much to you if you're not a computer scientist here, those zero-knowledge proofs are one of the key building blocks in modern digital cryptography, so very important. One of his other research interests is in electronic voting, which has been, and no doubt will become even more so, a major source or feature in the news in years to come. His talk today focuses on issues of cybersecurity in today's world, and I'm sure we will all be able to learn a thing or two about how to improve our own. So I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. David Bernhard.
Hi everyone, it's a great honor to be here. So my name is David, my accent is Swiss German in case you were wondering, and I'm going to take you through a couple of excerpts of the kind of things that I teach my computer scientists about cybersecurity. Some of you might have seen some of this before, but I've put at least one or two new things in here. Perhaps there's a tiny bit more about me, so I've now been upgraded to teaching fellow, and I've also got the role of senior tutor in computer science. So I'd say my kind of mission statement at this university is three things. I want to do excellent teaching, I want to support my students, and I want to increase the amount of purple in this university. It's my favorite color. If I had to think of a single image that can kind of serve as a metaphor for security, then it would be the humble padlock. But because we're talking about cybersecurity, here's a smart padlock. So it can be opened with a fingerprint, or if your smartphone, it can send you a text message whenever someone opens it, and it can be connected to the internet and a lot of other things. And this particular smart padlock got its 5 minutes of fame on the internet because some people were trying to be a little bit too smart. So in the early days, before it had this view, they made a metal prototype, and they sent this around to a reviewer who reviews general security-related stuff, and they asked him, could you give us a few positive words about this padlock? And this reviewer, he goes on Twitter by the name of Lockpicking Lawyer. He took a look at it, and he sent back this picture with a little red screw indicated. And his review was basically, I can't recommend this device because on closer inspection, if you unscrew it with these 3 screws, it just falls apart. You can burgle whatever it was protecting, you can screw it back together again, and no one will be any the wiser. This would have been interesting enough, except that the company then decided that clearly some kind of damage control was called for, so they put out a PR statement, and that's what really got them their 5 minutes of fame, because the company's reply to the accusation that you could just unscrew the lock and get in was the padlock is invincible to people who do not have a screwdriver. Once this lock got popular, the BBC got in on the story, they gave it to one of their security experts, and he said you don't even need a screwdriver. You can just point the smartphone at it and unlock it in 2 seconds. So, because this is a real company, and because I don't like getting sued any more than the next person, because this is a slightly more public lecture, I'm just going to add a quick disclaimer that these attacks related to an early prototype version of this padlock, and for all I know, the version you can buy online today has all these things fixed. One of the problems was that they weren't using any encryption in talking between the padlock and your smartphone, and that I gather they've fixed now. Another disclaimer is that I really didn't pick on this product because I have anything against that company in particular, but because I think they are just a general example of the general state of security on the internet these days, especially the Internet of Things. So any kind of device, I mean, in my very own building, we've had a new smart coffee machine installed a couple of weeks ago. It plays music when you press a button. The one thing it doesn't do is make you coffee because it's broken. So this is the general state of security and functionality on internet-enabled devices these days. Smart meters, smart watches, smart everything. The general state of the art is people launch these things as quickly as they can, and sometimes things don't quite work, and sometimes things are not quite secure. But I possibly just want to add one slight disclaimer to my disclaimer, that if your company's product is a padlock, and you haven't thought about security when you were building it, the phrase, "you had one job," comes to mind. But with that, let's move out of the context of this particular padlock and look at some more general things about security online, because as I said, the problem with this padlock in the first version is there was no encryption added. So they issued a software patch that added encryption, which is all fine, except that it appears some people don't like encryption, so we're going to have to talk about that. In all fairness, this was a government initiative that was big around 2014 and has since been sidelined, so I hope they've got the message that banning encryption wasn't quite the best of ideas. I also think in today's time, the UK government might have slightly more important things to deal with than whether or not they should think about banning encryption. So the first topic I wanted to talk about is data breaches. So we all know what hackers are. Hackers are people who sit in darkened rooms. They type on terminals with green text on a black background. They usually wear ski masks while they're sitting in front of the computer. And they hack for many different reasons. Some people hack for money. Some people hack for their country. Some people hack just for the fun of it. What's common to all these hackers is that sometimes when they break into a site, after they've finished with dealing with the data themselves, they sometimes dump it online. So data breaches are a big thing, and when a site gets hacked, you sometimes see millions of, or hundreds of millions of entries just dumped online as a big Excel file where you can see all the data, everyone's username, everyone's personal details if they added them to the site, and their passwords if the passwords weren't stored properly. And there is a security researcher called Troy Hunt from Australia who is doing the large and rather thankless task of gathering up every single data breach you can find in public and make it in a database where you can search for your own email address and see if it's appeared in any of those breaches. The site is called haveibeenpruned.com. For those of you who are not computer scientists, pruned is slang for owned, and owned is slang for hacked. These were the top 10 breaches around the time when I first made a set of slides dealing with his site. And around the time, it was a spectacular thing that the site had been breached and there were over 100 million entries in a single breach. Nowadays, something like that happens every few months or so. So here's some of the latest breaches, and it's slightly embarrassing that according to the latest stats I could find that are somewhat reliable, in January 2019, there were 4.4 billion humans who were kind of more than very occasional internet users. So that's about almost half the population of the world, I think, now. At the same time, in March 2019, when I checked last week, there were 7.8 billion breached accounts in Troy Hunt's database. Every single time I give this presentation, I update this number 1 week before the presentation, and if I check back on the day of the presentation, the number has gone up again. At this rate, there will soon be more breached accounts than there are human beings on the planet, and at some point, humans are officially going to lose their status as an intelligent species over this if we're not careful. So we should possibly at some point think about doing something about that. So what can you do about this? Well, you can go onto his site, you can put in your email address, and you will get either the green bar, that's good, or you get the red bar. If you get the red bar, you're going to have a fun evening changing your passwords. You can optionally, of course, also sign up for alerts, and then you will get an alert from him if your email address appears in any of the newer breaches. And I'm actually just going to go back a couple of slides to point out one of these things, because one of these breaches here, and this was a kind of a big thing when it came out, was from an American site called Ashley Madison. Ashley Madison is let's say it's a dating site for married people. And of course, this is slightly embarrassing. And just to show you the real impact of some of these things, several people ended their own lives over being discovered that they were in this database, and rather than facing up to their family or their constituents if they were a politician, they chose to end their own life when they'd been exposed. When this breach came out, a couple of enterprising hackers started a ransom service where they would scour entries in the breach and email those people in person saying, hey, we've found you in the breach, why don't you give us a little bit of money and then perhaps we'll keep quiet about it. Other less enterprising hackers just sent out spam emails to random people saying, hey, we found you in the breach, whether they were in the breach or not, suggesting if they paid up a little bit of money, then they wouldn't be exposed. So there's real human harm behind these kind of things. And you see other data breaches where pictures and videos of people's children have been exposed because they bought the child some kind of smart toy where the kid could take pictures of themselves to send to daddy when he's on a business trip and stuff, and this is all now landed online. So there is real harm behind this, and I wish humanity would kind of do something about it. But the action for you at the moment is go to this site, put your email address in there, see if anything comes up, and if so, consider whatever password you used for that site is in the hands of the bad guys. Speaking of passwords, so there's lots of advice online about what is or isn't a good password, and every site has its own rules, but roughly speaking, the one thing you should really be careful of is your university password, because it gives you access to all the university stuff, and it links to your student funding stuff and other important things. Just for your university password, 3 very basic rules. Not the same password as you're using anywhere else, not something that's your real name, not your real name spelled backwards either, not your university username spelled backwards or anything like that. The one piece of advice that I think makes sense for passwords is make them at least 10 characters long, 12 if you can at all bear it. Unless the site insists on it, don't bother with the number of capital letters and special characters, all of that. Just make the things long and make them unique. So I teach a first-year unit called Security 101 to my computer scientists. And as part of that unit, I set them an essay where they reflect on their personal security practice. One or the other person in this room might remember that. For some reason, even after setting my students an essay question, some of them still liked me enough to nominate me for a Best of Bristol lecture, so thank you very much for that. But I think the favorite essay that I got back this year, I'll say a few things about it, but anonymously, but it went something like, when I was a child, I used to play Minecraft, and I thought I was really clever because my Minecraft password was my real name, which no one online would ever know, because my mom told me not to do that, but someone found it anyway, they hacked into my account, they threw all my diamonds into a pit of lava, I was really sad about that, so I decided to become a computer scientist and learn how to do this properly. And I mean, if that's not sweet, I don't know what is. And also, still on the topic of passwords, not any of these passwords, please. The top 10 or top 20 or top 100,000 passwords that people use are very consistent from one breach to another and from one year to another. Password, in case you wondered, is not a good password. Like, by all means, wear the same brand of clothes as everyone else to fit in. Don't use the same password as everyone else. Okay, so now you've picked your super secure, unique University of Bristol password that is not known to anyone but you. The next thing the hackers will try is to get hold of it by other means, which brings us to the topic of phishing. So the University of Bristol is actually now a big enough and an interesting enough institution that we're seeing some very specific and targeted phishing attacks directed against the university, and they're very crafted. They're not just random spam. They're designed particularly to attack the University of Bristol as an institution. So not too long ago, I got an email from one of our faculty administrators saying, please be aware there are emails purporting to be from the dean. They're not legitimate, and you should just delete them. If you're the dean of engineering and you're wondering why no one's been replying to your emails for the last couple of weeks, that's why. But there were phishing emails sent pretending to be the dean. So before I actually show some examples, I want to kind of make a slightly philosophical point. Actually, I'm just going to go off script for a moment and say, since someone was foolish enough to give me a platform that's not kind of restricted to the computer science department, what I perhaps really want to say with this presentation is please stop computer scientists from taking over the world. We don't know how to run the world, and we will mess it up if you don't stop us. And this goes in so many ways. starting with the fact that there are rumors about what influence social media might or might not have had on recent elections, and things like convincing people to leave the European Union and all that. But in any case, we're moving towards a world where security knowledge is becoming as essential as, I don't know what, literacy or knowing how to cross the street. And the problem here is that the knowledge exists, but it's not known to the general public, right? Back when I was small, I was taught things like, look before you cross a road, don't accept sweets from strangers, and a few other things like that. And these were risks, but they were risks that my parents knew better than young David, so they could teach me about them. And now suddenly with this internet world, the things have been changed on its head. There are risks online, and there are completely new conventions online that perhaps the kids know better than their parents. So how, as a parent who didn't grow up with all this internet stuff, should you know what it means if someone sends you a particular combination of emoji in a chat message? Is that just something someone does, or is that offensive or a threat or something else? And how should you, as an average human being, know what to do when you get an email from the security team from Apple saying, hey, we need you to enter your password here for security reasons? So we're moving towards a world which really worries me, where anyone who doesn't have detailed technical security knowledge about computer science things will be less and less able to function, and risks everything from losing their life savings because they get tricked into sending their housing deposit to a wrong place, to getting their personal information exposed online, to other things. And the least bit I can do about this is raise a little bit of awareness now that someone has invited me to talk in public. But I think this is something that as a society we need a bit of a wider perspective on, and perhaps a discussion on. And we also perhaps need to think about which parts of these should we teach in schools and which parts should we perhaps legislate about. Because nowadays you practically need to be online to get any of your business done. You need to be online to find a job, because jobs will want their applications to be submitted via an online form. An email address is the absolute minimum you need for any kind of online existence, and perhaps in future having several linked social media accounts so the companies can get a better profile of you will be the absolute minimum you need. I mean, there's already lots of sectors of the industry where if you're not on LinkedIn, that will be a slight disadvantage to getting a job. Cybersecurity, incidentally, is the exception. It's accepted that cybersecurity researchers might not have a LinkedIn profile because half of them work for the secret services, and their first rule is don't have a big public profile online. So let's look at some examples of phishing. So I have an email address that I use. I know you won't be able to read this from the back, but I'll read some of it out for you. I have an email address that I use whenever I connect to a public Wi-Fi or a coffee shop or anything else which requires me to give an email address to get Wi-Fi. And you get some really interesting emails on that address. And this one here is basically a scattergun ransom approach. And the text is something like, hi, I sent an email from your account. This shows that I've compromised your computer. This happened because I installed malware on your machine when you visited an adult website, and I can control your webcam and your microphone and anything else. It goes on like this for about 3 pages, and then says that if you go and buy some Bitcoin and give them to me, then I won't send your entire online browsing profile and all the porn you've watched to your family and embarrass you like that. All of this is complete rubbish, of course. They didn't actually compromise this account at all. They didn't send an email from this account. They sent an email to this account. But this is just one example of ransomware and phishing that you get online. It's kind of just like background noise on the internet, that people will threaten you with things online. And if you don't pick up on the fact that something like this is a scam, you might get worried. Another example, here's a phishing email that pretends to be from Apple, and it's copied Apple's style of email right down to the stupidly low contrast of the text. So let's make this black and white a bit. And again, the text is something like, for security reasons, you need to log into your Apple account and give your password, and if you don't do this within 24 hours, you will be permanently locked out and you will lose all the music you bought, or something like that. As a general rule, any email that comes into you online that has any sense of urgency and that has any kind of threat about what will happen to you if you don't do that, especially if the email pretends to be security related, assume that it might be phishing. Anything that asks you to go to this site and enter your password, or go to this site and do that for security reasons, and you absolutely have to do it within the next 48 hours, otherwise bad things will happen to you, is probably phishing email. Something else you can do is if you hover over this button, which is just a glorified link, and look where it's coming from, you'll see at the bottom that the link this thing is pointing to doesn't actually look like Apple at all. So this is presumably a site which the phishers have either made by themselves, or they've hacked into someone else's site and hosted it there. And if you click on that link, you will be taken to something that looks exactly like the real Apple sign-in page. And if you put your Apple username and password in there, then the hackers get your Apple ID and can go and raid your details. And if you've linked your credit card to your Apple account, they can buy stuff and make money off you that way. Another example, this is a real phishing email that was sent to me claiming to be from the University of Bristol. And again, the text will be tiny, but you can see there's this big text saying account security alert, which is kind of probably a giveaway that it's a phishing email. And then when you click the account security link, you'll be taken to something that looks exactly like the Bristol login page because they want to steal your university username and password. And again, the thing with these phishing emails is if you get a badly designed one, you will find what I call negative indicators. Everything from links that don't look quite right, through to bad spelling and grammar, through to little things like that this is supposedly a University of Bristol email sent from kiel.ac.uk. We do a lot of outsourcing for our IT stuff. We don't outsource to Kiel as far as I know. You'll also see that the Bristol account security link that you go to links to a page in Greece somewhere, not because any specific reasons, just that apparently that's where the phishers managed to hack someone else's website and host their phishing link. So the moment an email at all looks like it might be a little bit off, be suspicious, treat it as phishing, and if it claims to be from someone you know, then ask that person via some other phone, like phone or in person, whether it was them or not. Another example, this was something that went around in, I think it was December last year or November. So this was an email sent to me from another University of Bristol account. And again, the kind of technical knowledge that apparently every single human being should have these days is if you receive an email from Outlook and you get this kind of colored bubble up here with 2 letters, it means that this email is verified as coming from an account in your organization. So this is a Bristol account, and these letters are the initials of the sender it came from. I've blanked out their actual name because what happened here is someone fell for an earlier phishing attack. The phishers took over their account and used that to send more emails to other students. And the email is just a single message with a big green button saying, click me for the message, and then you get taken to something that looks exactly like the Bristol login page, with which they steal your account details and use it to send even more emails to someone else. And this was a specifically targeted attack directly against the University of Bristol, and there were several forms of this that were written in different ways, targeting students and staff. So this was someone who was specifically attacking Bristol and had a little bit of knowledge of how Bristol works. They didn't have quite enough knowledge to not accidentally send this email to things like the Security 101 mailbox, which kind of made me a slight bit suspicious, and I forward this on to IT. So these phishing emails, they can come from absolutely anywhere. Sometimes they come from a real Bristol address because they've hacked someone's account. Sometimes they come from something that's not Bristol at all. But again, you get an email from someone saying, please could you log in here and do that? If you're at all suspicious, check with the real sender, and if they say it wasn't them, report it to IT services. The latest campaign that's been going on is that people have been making email accounts on free mail services like Gmail or Hotmail or Mail.ru, which is just a Russian free mail provider, with names that were the real name or the username or something else of a senior member of the university. So in January, we got a phishing email in the computer science department pretending to be our head of department. In February, we got one pretending to be our head of school. In March, as I showed you before, we got one pretending to be the dean. So my prediction is in April, we're going to get one pretending to be the pro-vice-chancellor or something. And these are emails that come from accounts that have the correct real name or username. So this person has obviously done a bit of research and knows what our dean is called, but they've sent it from a Gmail account that has Bristol in the name, but it's not a real Bristol account. So 2 things you can do here. First of all, if you get an email that claims to be from someone in Bristol, especially a staff member, doubly especially if it's a senior staff member, and it doesn't come from their Bristol AC UK email address, Treat it as dangerous until you know it's correct. If you're suspicious, reply back to their Bristol address saying, hi, was this you? And if they say, no, it wasn't, then it was phishing. The second thing you can do is you cannot encourage that by not using a non-Bristol address for anything else. So if you're a student and you want to ask a staff member about something uni-related, please use your Bristol email address. This has two advantages. One of them is that we know it's you, and the second one is that for data protection reasons, those of us who know about how our data protection policy works will be a bit suspicious about sending out personal information about a student, like answering a query about what exam results they got or something like that, to an email that's not their Bristol account. If you're a staff member, if you're one of the 3 staff members that has read like all 17 Bristol data security policies that we have on the IT services website, you'll know this already, but for everyone else, for data protection reasons, you do not store or send confidential information about any Bristol employee or student outside of Bristol systems. So you don't process that information on your private laptop, and you don't send it on your private email address. So please, if you're a staff member, don't use your Gmail address or anything else for Bristol business. A, because you're encouraging bad practice that will lead other people to get phished, and B, because you're breaking the Data Protection Act if you do it wrong. So by doing this bit properly and being suspicious of anyone who's not, we can encourage just a little bit of extra security there. If you click on one of these phishing links, you will get to a page which looks exactly like Bristol's login page. So the next thing I want to talk about is encryption, because this is an example of our single sign-on page. This is usually one of the first things I see every morning when I log into my various different services. And if you click on a phishing link and the phishing link is well done, you'll get to a page that looks exactly like that. So you can't just do the thing by looking at the page and see, like obviously if there's mistakes, if like the text box is a little bit off and the text below has been replaced by something else with bad grammar, then it's probably not the real one. But as we'll see in a few slides' time, if the phishers are doing their job right, the page will look exactly like the real one because they're basically giving you a copy of the real page. So before you type your university password into here, you probably want to know who is going to get my password. And the real page uses encryption for 2 reasons. First one is I don't want anyone else to listen in when I type my password. That's kind of the classical thing that encryption is supposed to do. So when I'm sitting at my computer, let's say I'm on a wireless network, my computer is connected to the wireless network. The wireless network is somehow connected to this thing called the internet, and the internet is somehow connected to the University of Bristol servers. And the basic way a computer over the internet works is when I type something like bristol.ac.uk into the address bar, my computer shouts out to the world, hello Bristol, are you there? And then if you're lucky, you get a response back saying, hello, I'm Bristol, I'm here, what would you do? But my view as an individual or as a computer is more like this. I know I'm connected to a wireless network, and the wireless network is connected to something or other. So all I know is that my computer shouts out to the world, hello Bristol, and at some point something comes back saying, hello, I'm Bristol. And I don't know anything about what happens along the way. Well, I mean, if I'm a computer scientist and I know how to use network status tools, I can find out a little bit more information, but still I have no guarantees who's actually sitting on the other end. So the first thing I want to do with encryption is I want to prevent spy guy here from listening in. So the traditional threat model is 2 good people, so me and Bristol are trying to talk to each other, and somewhere on the network, spy guy is listening in to everything we say. And obviously, if the spy guy is listening into my password, that's bad, so I want to do something about it, and that something is encryption. And encryption works like this. Me and Bristol somehow agree on a secret key. Then I put this encryption box in front of my network connection, and everything I send through that gets encrypted with the key, and Bristol on the other end has the same encryption box with the same key, and that decrypts it again. So now if spy guy is listening in, they see some encrypted ciphertext, which makes about as much sense as the string of random letters that I put on the slide here, and they don't get to see my password. But that's kind of encryption model 1. I encrypt, send the encrypted stuff over, Bristol decrypts again on the other side, and anyone in between doesn't get anything. You might be asking yourselves, okay, now how does my computer set up a secret key that's shared with Bristol's computer, but cryptographers have thought about that for a long while, and they've come up with a solution which is basically let's use magic. The magic in question is called key exchange, and it's a cryptographic protocol. And the interesting thing is it works in a way that you wouldn't think possible, but it uses mathematics, and in fact it uses advanced enough mathematics that it's basically magic. So the idea behind key exchange is that any two people over a public discussion can agree a key. So if I want to talk in confidence to someone else in this room, assuming we are both cryptographers, I can do a bit of mathematics, generate a few numbers, and shout one of those numbers out to this entire room. And my confederate can then do a bit of mathematics and shout out a random number back at me. And again, everyone in the room can hear this, but from these numbers, we can both do a bit more mathematics, and that gives us a secret key which only the two of us know, no one else in the room, even if they're listening into our entire conversation. And that's not just because most people in this room are presumably not cryptographers and don't know how the maths works, but the maths is in such a way that even if you're a cryptographer, it's conjectured that unless you can solve the biggest open problem in cryptography and gain $1 million along the way, because there's a bounty on that problem, then you cannot break into this kind of key exchange protocol. So that's almost the simple part. If I shout out to the world, hello Bristol, and someone shouts back to me, hello, I'm Bristol, I can shout at them, I'd like to do key exchange, and then we can exchange a few random numbers, and then we can talk to each other. And anyone who is just listening in doesn't get to see anything because it's encrypted. So that's really good, unless your spy guy is intelligent. Because what spy guy actually wants to do is not just listen in, they want to sit somewhere on our network. So this is the bit about why you're told to be suspicious about connecting to just any network in a coffee shop. If the coffee shop itself is running a malicious Wi-Fi network, because they have some kind of contract with someone where they get paid extra money for letting the someone control the network, or if the coffee shop is using a router that has been hacked by someone without their knowledge and they've put spy software on that, what spy guy actually wants to do is sit in the middle, and when I shout out, hello Bristol, it's actually spy guy who's going to shout out back, hello, I'm Bristol. At which point I shout out, I'd like to do key exchange, and spy guy says, sure, I can do that. And then I do the super secure cryptographic key exchange protocol with spy guy. And now I have a secret key that's known only to me and the spy. And now I can, in perfect confidence, type my University of Bristol password and send it to the spy. Oops. If I now want to ask Bristol, say, okay, give me my exam results from last year, what spy guy is going to do is spy guy is going to connect to Bristol, do key exchange with Bristol, and then that means there's a second secret key in use between the spy and Bristol. So I see that I'm sending encrypted traffic out to somewhere on the internet. That looks okay. For Bristol, it looks like they're sending out encrypted traffic to somewhere on the internet. That's also okay. But both of us are talking to the spy, and the spy is reading all our messages. And this is why a perfect phishing attack looks exactly like the real site. Because what a good phisher is going to do is when I connect to their phishing site, they are going to connect to the real site, get the real login page, and you just send a copy of the real login page to me. So the page I see on the phishing site is going to look exactly like the real thing, complete with the correct grammar and everything, because it is a copy of the real thing. And that's a bit of a problem. So just because I'm encrypting something doesn't mean I know who I'm talking to. So we need some way to solve this. And it turns out there is a solution to that. And the solution to that is for a group of powerful people in the world to come together and to form a conspiracy. This conspiracy is called the Certificate Conspiracy, and here are some of the members. I mean, I say conspiracy kind of as a slight joke. The members of this organization are public, and you can look them up online, but it is also kind of who gets to join this organization and who gets to do what is kind of not, let's say, completely transparent. But the idea is this. People who make operating systems or web browsers, so Microsoft, Apple, Google, Mozilla, all of them, and people who want to become certificate authorities agree on a set of rules. And the rules are, if you, as a certificate authority, do this, this, and this, then we will include your certificates in our browsers and operating systems. So when you install Windows or Mac OS or Android or Google Chrome as a browser, then a bunch of certificates come with that browser or operating system, and these are the certificates of the people who are part of this conspiracy. And now the slightly conspiratorial part is that anyone who now wants to make a secure connection over the internet has to buy a certificate from one member of this conspiracy. So Bristol has to go to one of these members and pay them money, and they will give us a certificate confirming I, a legitimate member of the certificate conspiracy, confirm that you are actually the University of Bristol and not the spy guy. And so when I actually connect to Bristol's website, I want to look out for the security indicators to say, yes, this is actually a good person, or rather, this is a person who has paid money to a certificate authority, and they were convinced that they are who they say they are. So the solution here is so that I know who I'm talking to, because from the point of view of my computer, I shout out to the world, hello Bristol, and the world shouts back, hello, I'm Bristol. But what they actually shout back is, hello, I'm Bristol, and here is my certificate to prove it. And it's all done in such a way that unless you're actually Bristol, you will have trouble giving me a forged certificate that looks like the real one, because your certificate has to be signed by a member of this conspiracy, and the conspiracy certificate is already built into my browser. So this protocol is, its full name, it's called Transport Layer Security, and it does two things. So when I actually want to make an encrypted connection, I want to know, A, I'm talking to someone in such a way that no third parties can listen in, and B, the second party who I'm talking to is actually who they say they are. This is called Transport Layer Security, or TLS for short, known to the general public, if you know it at all, as that thing with the padlock icon, and it's encryption plus certificates. So next time you want to enter your University of Bristol password somewhere in a browser, the way this is set up is like this. Your browser window has two parts. The bit at the bottom is under the control of the site, and that's called the content area. And this content area is under the control of the site. So whatever goes in there is determined by whoever you're talking to, like Bristol. Bristol can choose what goes in there. If you're connected to a fake Bristol spying website, they can also choose what goes in there, and if they want, they can put in a copy of the real site. But the little strip at the top of your browser window, the browser area, is not under control of the website. That's under control of the browser. So if you're fake Bristol, you can't control what's in the top area, you can just control what's in the bottom. So the solution with these security indicators that you're supposed to look out for is that they're in the top area. So there's two things you want to look out for here. The first thing, which you might have heard once or twice, is look out for the padlock icon. So the story goes something like, originally, people just put a padlock icon in here and told everyone, look out for the padlock. Now, if you just tell normal people, look for the padlock, what the bad guys started doing is here in the, if you just go back one, is here in their content area, they would just put a picture of a padlock, because they can do that because it's their content area. And everyone go, oh, look, there's a picture of a padlock, I guess this is the real site. So what you actually are looking for is a picture of the padlock in the browser area at the top, not in the content area. And that is a signal that the browser agrees that this site has got a certificate from a member of their conspiracy, and they're therefore probably the real person. The other thing you want to look out for is that the address starts with HTTPS. That's another security indicator that means more or less the same thing. The S at the end is the important part, because that stands for secure. So next time you enter your University of Bristol password somewhere in a web browser, look at the bar at the top. Does it say HTTPS? Is there a padlock icon? And depending on your browser, is it green? The story here is that originally there was just a padlock icon, but it was fairly small and it was hard to find. So browsers changed to putting the bar in green. And then you could teach people, look out for the green and the padlock icon, because that's clearer. In fact, and this is kind of another conspiratorial part, the certificate system was set up so that if you paid a little bit of money, you got a little bit of green, and if you paid more money, then you got a lot more green. So if you taught people, look for the green, then the conspiracy could go to people and say, that's a really nice website you have there. If you pay us a little bit more money, you will get more green in the browser bar, and people will trust you more, despite the fact that the kind of encryption you're using for the lots of green and the little green is exactly the same. So this is kind of why I call this thing a bit of a conspiracy. So for several years now, we've been teaching people, like they're different, like Barclays has an online campaign where if you're a Barclays customer, you'll get emails saying, here's our secure digital campaign, look at this information about security online. The government has a campaign, the National Cybersecurity Center has one, which they go into schools about, and several of these campaigns have said, look for the padlock icon, look for the green bit. After several years of teaching the entire world, look for the padlock, look for the green bit, Google has decided we don't like green, let's make it gray instead. And that's confused a few people. So Google's decision was that they're still going to have a padlock icon, but they're going to make everything gray instead of green to look into their better color scheme. So everyone who was taught in school, look for the green bit, that is now no longer accurate. This is possibly perhaps not the most brilliant idea in the world, because it's hard enough to teach non-computer scientists about what security indicators to look for in the first place. Then once you've taught them just changing the indicator and saying now you have to look for a little one, I mean, that just looks stupid to me. So what should you be looking out for when you enter your university password, or indeed any password anywhere? Padlock icon, still a thing. Google hasn't polished that yet. Look for the HTTPS with the S at the start of the address. What Google is doing now, and that I think is good from a user interaction point of view, is that originally you got a positive indicator like a padlock if you were on a secure page, but you didn't get any indicator at all if you were on a normal page, which kind of makes sense back in the day when kind of 90% of the internet was not secure. Nowadays, it's the other way around. Most pages you will visit nowadays have some kind of security, so most pages actually use HTTPS. So Google has moved to showing a negative indicator, which is a little text saying not secure, against a page that is not using HTTPS. So if you're visiting a web page, it asks for your password, and in the top bar it says not secure, then believe the bit that says not secure. If you're not using Google's browser, then check for the green, because everyone else is still doing that. Also check the address and see is it what you expect. Because, for example, I don't know if anyone actually has read this, but this line at the bottom of Bristol's single sign-on page says, check the address of this web page. Our single sign-on page, if it looks like this, is hosted at https sso for single sign-on.brist.ac.uk. If you see a page that looks like this, and the address is sso.brist.ac.uk with HTTPS in front of it, is probably the real thing, because this indicator up here is controlled by the browser, and that's really hard to forge. If you see a page that looks like that, and the address bar is anything but sso.brist.ac.uk with an HTTPS in front, it's probably a really well-made phishing site, and you shouldn't enter your university password in it. And this kind of brings me back to our philosophical point. It's kind of all well and good for me to be able to teach a couple of hundred of you to look out for these indicators, and then you can go out of the room and you're top cybersecurity specialists. But the world is working on a model where email providers and online shops and everyone else is just somehow assuming that everyone has this as background knowledge and they learn it in schools or they pick it up as they go along. Anyone who hasn't been to a talk by a cybersecurity specialist and doesn't know about these indicators is at risk of falling to a phishing attack. And the problem is that we've built all this lovely online system without thinking about, does it work for the kind of people who are not level 11 computer scientists? And it turns out lots of people do fall for this stuff. And there's been psychology study after psychology study which shows that once you put people under at least a little bit of stress, they just want to go in and get their work done. So they will type their password into anything that asks for it because they don't understand what's going on. They don't want to understand. They don't want to become security specialists. They just want to log in and read their emails or do whatever the task is they're supposed to do. As a bonus tip, if you get a link in an email, a chat message, or anything else like that saying, hey, could you quickly log in here and see this document, instead of actually clicking the link, just go to the website, log in normally, and see if there's a message or a document waiting for you there. If you get a message for your bank saying there's one new message in your account, please click this link, even if the message is real, don't click the link, go to your bank's website, log in there. If there is a message waiting for you, it will somehow be displayed on your bank's website. That removes yet another way for phishers to attack you because they will send you fake emails saying you have one new message, click the link, and that takes you to a fake login page. And sure, you can then check do they have the padlock icon and the S indicator and the green bar and all that. But if you train yourself, instead of clicking on a link, just go to the website, log in there, then you are avoiding one more way of being attacked. Okay, so all this encryption stuff is really good. Except that, wait a minute, didn't the government want to ban encryption? Actually, the government didn't want to ban this kind of encryption, so we need to look at that as our last topic for a few more minutes. So the government doesn't actually care about you making an encrypted connection to the University of Bristol. And the government doesn't care, because if they think something really bad is going on, they can turn up to the University of Bristol with a court order and say, we want to be able to read all your traffic for a bit. So the government doesn't mind that kind of encryption too much, because they can get around it if they really want to. What the government minds is this. When you're sending a message from one phone to another using a messenger app, and this holds the same way for all messenger apps, whether it's Telegram or Facebook or iMessage or WhatsApp or Snapchat or any of the others, your phone is actually not directly connected to the other person's phone, because that's not how mobile networks work. Your phone is connected to the messaging app server, and the server is then connected to the other phone. And when you send a text message, the text message goes to the mobile phone provider, and then forward it onto the other person's phone, and WhatsApp and everything else works the same. And if they use encryption the way I've just shown you, then because they have to sit in the middle for this connection to work at all, when you're doing an encrypted connection, normally what happens is you are sharing a key with the server, and the server is sharing another key with the other person's phone. And the government doesn't mind that as well, because the government, if they think that you're a terrorist, they can turn up to WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever else with a court order, or in the US without a court order, with a national security order, and say, we want you to give us the keys for that particular person and read their messages. What the government was worried about was some of these messaging apps offer a feature called end-to-end encryption. And end-to-end encryption is the messaging app facilitating two phones doing key exchange with each other in such a way that the messaging app doesn't get your keys. So the app provider will basically prod your phone saying, you start a key exchange, you give over the random number, then it'll give that random number to the other person and say, you start a key exchange as well, exchange those keys, and the result is that you get a system where your phone has the secret key, your friend's phone also has a secret key, but the messaging app itself has deliberately set up keys in such a way that they don't get the key for your messages. So an end-to-end encrypted messaging system is one where you can talk to a friend over a messenger in such a way that the messenger doesn't learn your secret key and can't read your messages. And that's what the government was worried about, because it thought that that would let terrorists and other bad guys communicate in such ways that even if they turned up with a court order at the messaging company, all the company could say was, look, we don't have the keys, what would you like to do? So this end-to-end encryption, this is what they were worried about, and this is what David Cameron wanted to ban. After a bit of media outcry and after kind of the whole computer science world told them, no, that's a really stupid idea, it looks like this idea was kind of quietly put to one side. And let's be honest, our current Prime Minister has slightly more important things to worry about, like how long am I going to survive in this job? So I think she's probably not going to reactivate this encryption. Which services use these? It's a bit confusing. WhatsApp always has been end-to-end. That was kind of their unique selling point at one point. They've been taken over by Facebook, but they're still end-to-end. Telegram always sold themselves as a secure messenger. They can do end-to-end, but only if you enable the secret chats feature. Apple has traditionally been very good on privacy, so iMessage, FaceTime, and so on, these are all end-to-end encrypted. In fact, Apple is so good at privacy that the FBI once got annoyed at them and wanted to take them to court, and Apple's answer was basically, our company is worth a bit more than the amount of money in the Federal Reserve, bring on your lawyers, at which point even the FBI backtracked. Skype and Snapchat are famously not end-to-end encrypted. So if you send someone a message over Snapchat, from your friend's point of view, yes, it will vanish after a few seconds, but all messages sent over Snapchat are stored unencrypted on Snapchat servers. This has positive features in that if you use Snapchat to bully your classmates or to send them inappropriate pictures of ducks or something like that, then someone can go to the police can go to Snapchat can establish whether you were using it in an abusive way or not, and if you were, then they can take you to court for it. So that only works because Snapchat is not end-to-end. But if you're using an end-to-end encrypted messaging system, then the messaging app doesn't know what kind of pictures of stuff you're sending. Facebook famously claims they do end-to-end, but if you look what they're actually doing, it only holds if it's from mobile to mobile, so not PC to PC, and both mobiles are using the Facebook Messenger app. So Facebook is sometimes end-to-end. If you are at all focused on privacy because you are a journalist or because you are wanting to talk to a friend in confidence about something or so on, and you can spend a few minutes to research this, it's to your advantage to use a messaging app that is end-to-end encrypted. It just gives you that bit of extra security. And the other kind of standard argument is, if the government doesn't like this thing, then it's probably a good idea. Right? So that was what the government tried to ban until they realized it would be a bit complicated. So, and my whole thought of security online can basically be summed up in these sentences. It's a war zone out there, and you will be bombarded with messages containing spam and phishing and everything else. And pretty much my only piece of advice I can give you in return is constant vigilance. Keep your ones out, keep secure. Don't type your password into anything until you've established that it looks like it's an okay site. Check the security indicators. Be aware of phishing. If you have family members, especially older ones who grew up when this kind of thing wasn't a problem, talk to them about phishing. They, when you were smaller, talked to you about accepting sweets from strangers. You can now in return talk to them about clicking on links in phishing emails. And finally, if you're not in your first year, and if you've been using the same password for the University of Bristol for over a year or so, this evening is a really good day to change it. And that was about what I wanted to say today. That's all, folks. Thank you very much. Stay secure online.
Thank you very much, David, for a really interesting lecture. We do have a few minutes for some questions. Obviously, if you do need to head off for 2 o'clock, that's absolutely fine. But if anyone has any questions, we do have a microphone to go around. Yes.
You didn't mention sometimes there's apps that you can have in your browser, that allow you to save password, like they're kind of like password wallets. Is that secured?
So these things are, let's see if it's long. These apps are called password managers, and some of them are really secure and some of them are not. What a password manager is doing is it's replacing you having to remember lots of different passwords, one for each site, with you having to remember one master password to unlock your password manager. This is kind of just moving the risk to a different place. If you use that, I use one myself, and your master password is really strong and secure, it's a security plus. If someone gets hold of your master password, that might give them access to all your different websites. It's a bit of a trade-off. I think that the average person these days probably has, depending on which study you look at, anything from 12 to 20 passwords, or different sites that need passwords. And certainly using a password manager means you don't have to think of and remember and regularly change 20 different long passwords. So I would encourage that, either using the one built into your browser or the ones you can download online.
Somewhat related to that is the number of passwords that we're encouraged to generate.
Yeah.
Is there any, do you condone using a different password for every site that one has, or are there any shortcuts other than a wallet, which I've always found a bit terrifying? Any other shortcuts that you would advocate?
So my personal policy is, if I go on, let's say, a website, and I want to read, let's say it's a news site, and I read the first article, and then a window pops up saying, hey, if you want to read more than one article, please make an account and sign in with a password. I have 1 or 2 low-level passwords that I use for all those sites that ask me to log in, but I don't really care about them. And if I'm using one of those low-level passwords, I will not use my credit card details on those sites or give in any other too personal information. And that's okay, because especially as a computer scientist, you will have 50 or 60 different sites that ask you to sign in, different forums, news sites, and so on. That's absolutely fine. No human being can remember that many secure passwords. The things I keep secure are my university account, because that's important, because as a senior tutor, for example, I see a lot of really confidential stuff that I don't want to get out. My private email account, because if you get into my email, you can get into my 20 other things by clicking the password reset link, which then goes to my email. And 1 or 2 other things I use a lot, like Facebook and Amazon, because a lot of my online life is on there, Amazon because my credit card details are on there, and I use it a lot. So I have 4 or 5 sites which I have unique, strong passwords for, and 20 or 30 other sites which I use the same password for as a trade-off. That is better than using the same password across every site, and it's more realistic than me remembering 50 different long passwords. So yeah, I could condone that.
Hey, there was this. There's this thing that was on the news recently about Facebook storing passwords unencrypted. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Facebook is actually famous for being one of the few companies who have not landed on Troy Hunt's attack site, because Facebook from the start up was a technology company, and the way they store their actual passwords in their main database is really secure with like 3 different levels of security. What happened in that attack was Facebook, like every site, has logging facilities that log and monitor every single request that comes in for various reasons. One is to see kind of the health of their system, like seeing if some of their machines are responding particularly slowly, or if they're suddenly getting a bunch of requests all from one place, or if one person is trying to try a lot of different passwords for the same account. So it's absolutely routine practice for a web application to log every single request that comes in, so the admins can look through the logs and figure out if something unusual is going on. The problem with Facebook is they were logging a bit over generously, and they were capturing every single parameter in every request in their logs, and that included the passwords because they were also capturing the login requests. So that's kind of, it's a fairly elementary mistake to make, but it's the kind of, Facebook is so big, even if their security is 10 times better than everyone else's, they're still a target. So in the way that's slightly worrying. But the fact that this thing happens to them just shows that it can happen to the best of us. These logs were accessible only to, as I understand, Facebook employees of a certain seniority under certain conditions. There's no evidence yet that any human being has actually seen your password, but they might still ask you to change it as a precaution if you were affected by this. It's not the kind of thing that immediately makes me worried yet.
We've got time for one more, if there is one.
Hi. Do you think multi-factor auth is the answer to all of this?
Two-factor auth would be the answer to all of this if we could make it usable for everyone. The idea of using a USB key or something else as a second factor has been around for ages. It works in an organization where you can enforce it. Like Google, a couple of years ago, famously forced all their employees to use two-factor authentication, and since then the number of successful phishing attacks against Google employees has dropped to 0. Two-factor auth is also a good thing in a high security environment. There are speculations that if John Podesta, who was on Hillary Clinton's campaign team, had used two-factor auth, then certain things might not have happened, and then we might or might not have had a different outcome to the US presidential election. So if you're in an organization that can enforce it, or if you're a high-value target, absolutely yes. For the average human being, the problem is two-factor auth is one more step along the way. It's getting really usable with smartphones because the phone itself, especially if it has a fingerprint sensor as the second factor, or if it's an iPhone that has a secure element anyway, as long as you're happy with the phone acting as the second factor, which means if you drop your phone down the toilet, then you better have some backup codes written on a piece of paper somewhere, that's absolutely fine. Two-factor auth on a browser where you have to do this extra step of plugging your two-factor auth key in, waiting for it to set up, and then press the button on that, is just one extra step to log in, and that turns a few people off. So online shops have for a while noticed that every single field or step you put in the login form turns a certain percentage of your customers away. That's why these forms these days saying, please sign up for our newsletter, contain one single field, just saying put in your email here, because they noticed even having 2 fields, name and email, turns a few more people away. So having a two-factor authentication step turns even more people away. I'm personally strongly in favor, we just need to get the usability right.
Right, so I think we're just about out of time. Can I once again thank you all for coming to our final lecture of the series. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one and any others if you've been there. And finally, can you just join me once more in thanking David for his lecture? Thank you.